Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Chilluminati podcast, episode 217. As always, I'm one of your hosts, Mike Martin, joined by the struck off and die duo of LA, Jesse.
That sounds like something that you want somebody to go do that you don't like. Go struck off and die! Struck off and die, you piece of shit!
They were Tony Gardner and Phil Hammond.
I'm still lost.
No, all right. They're a British comedy duo active in the 90s. Let's see. They covered various areas of health services, apparently. They had their own BBC radio show.
Oh, those hilarious health services.
Yeah, hilarious. The Infant in the Whining Schoolboy, August 17th, 1994. The Lover Sighing Like a Furnace.
Are you sure these aren't from 1894?
Well, these were their take on like
Dreadfuls?
Shakespearean themes.
Okay, all right.
From a show called As You Like It.
The Shakespeare show?
Yeah, the Shakespeare show. Looks like they did some radio Shakespeare stuff.
All right.
They also did stuff in 93 that was like, goofy fun times. Complete series, 1 through 3. You can get it right now on Audible.
Only 50 more episodes for us to have a working knowledge of 80s through 90s British comedy.
I'll get you all there, I promise. It's my one devote promise to you all. Is you'll learn all about the UK comedy duos, both good and bad. I love that.
And my promise to you is that as long as you keep going to patreon.com/ChilluminatiPod and giving us a little bit of your money, a little bit of your hard-earned bread, we'll keep just laying up these thick, fat, golden bricks of audio beauty right into your ear canals, straight from our magic holes, if you know what I'm saying. And that's my main message. But I also want to reach out to those disgustingly rich listeners that we have out there. I know how it goes. I don't
think you're disgusting. I think you are a job maker and upstanding
entrepreneur.
Yeah. And I want you to entrepreneur that cash into my pocket, baby.
That's exactly what I'm saying. Listen, I'm jealous of you. We're all jealous of you. We think you're great. And it's awesome that one night while you were on, Google, you came across us when you were looking for like sexy Bigfoot or whatever the hell way you got here. I don't know how you got here, but I'm glad you're here now. To us, you're part of the family, and that's why you should share with us your riches. And I think just if one of you could just go sign up for that $10,000 a month slot, think about how hilarious that would be. Think about how funny that would be.
What a good goof.
It'd be so silly for you to go and drop $10K on our Patreon, and it would fund so much great stuff. And on top of us suddenly becoming your personal paranormal podcast for a month, you'll get all the benefits that everybody gets, like ad-free episodes and access to our show Rotten Popcorn, in which we watch Mathis's weird broken video store of nightmares movies, and also slowly the X-Files, and we do mini-sodes every week where you hear about all kinds of stuff. Lately I've been carrying on the story of the Green Stone, and before somebody else posts on the subreddit, yes, I do know about the Smurfs game that has the Green Stone in it. I've seen it. It's like the La Llorona movie.
Dude, have you also seen the Jeff the Mongoose movie coming?
I heard that is coming.
That's also coming.
If you're out there, person who books press tour dates for Nander Fodor and the fucking Jeff the Mongoose movie, send Simon Pegg to my podcast.
Yeah.
Send Simon Pegg to my podcast. We'll do Jeff the Mongoose too. Send it. Patreon.com/ChilluminatiPod. If you're rich, give us $10,000. Welcome back to the show. It's the World's Fair.
I'll believe whatever you want.
They're killing people at the World's Fair.
Yeah, they did. They killed some people. It's crazy. After I've been killing people in Baldur's Gate 3 fucking for like 100 hours.
Calm it down, nerd.
So also, when you're listening to this, it'll already be too late. We'll be in Indianapolis, but you can be excited because the next couple episodes after this one, there'll be some special guests maybe. We'll see. I might be out in LA with the boys themselves.
That's some cool things we're going to do while we're in LA. We're going to go some cool ideas.
You're right, Alex. We got to talk about none other than Herman Webster Mudgett. It's been a couple of weeks.
Mudgett.
I don't know if you remember the story of good old Webster Mudgett, also known as HH Holmes.
Who could forget a name like Herbert Webster Mudgett?
Herbert Webster Mudgett. And you know what I just realized over the past week is that his like great grandson was also at some point basically saying that he was also Jack the Ripper, because Jack the Ripper was happening at the exact same time this was going on. And so his grandson came out a few years ago and was like, my great grandpappy also Jack the Ripper. Absolutely a lie. He is not Jack the Ripper.
Never was. A possibility.
Yeah, it wasn't at all him. Definitely
totally
not
different
him.
MO. Yeah,
totally different. It's so bizarre. But just to put that out there in case there are people who are like, wait, wasn't he Jack the Ripper? He wasn't. No, H.H. Holmes was just a weird kid in a small town of very religious folk who teased his friends, liked to scare them with skeletons, would dissect animals and hide their remains in the woods. And all the while, as he got older, the people in town, his family, all kind of knew and whispered about the weird shit that Mudgett was getting up to. But eventually, after college and after he moved away for that, he was looking for a new start, a place where nobody knew who he was, where he could walk in as H.H. Holmes and nobody would know who Webster Mudgett is. And that's where we left off last episode, as he packed his bags at the age of 25 and headed to the bustling streets of Chicago. And with a plot in mind, because lest you forget, the one big thing he was also really good at was fucking insurance scams. The man was stealing corpses to pass off insurance scams to make a ton of money.
Yeah, it's funny. It's funny that one of the things that serial killers we can add to the bingo card is a side hustle, a really obsessively weird side hustle. For
John
some
Wayne
reason.
Gacy with his construction.
And he's chicken. He's a chicken maven. What the fuck is going on here?
You got to do something with the rest of your day.
They're wheeling and dealing.
Relationships. It can't always be a sexual thing. You got to spend time with that person. So what are you going to do? Right.
Even
Same thing
killers.
here. You gotta, between murders, you gotta fill the time with something.
You're right. They're still well-rounded people. They shouldn't be defined by their string of uncaught murders.
I don't know. That's what I said.
Yeah. Well, according to his own confessions at the end, when he was arrested, he confessed up to 27 killings in his time in Chicago and his various activities in the surrounding areas. However, at the end of today's episode, after his arrest and we talk about what happened, we'll see how much of that we can actually confirm and how much of that is likely H.H. Holmes being an egomaniac and spinning a story that's much grander than it actually was. But we're going to start in 1886 in Chicago. A man seemingly ordinary but weirdly enigmatic stepped off a train and into the heart of the Windy City.
I thought you were going to say into our hearts.
Herman H.H. Holmes, here to love you.
Yeah.
This man, known to most as Dr. H.H. Holmes, was in reality Herman Webster Mudgett, lest you forget, and he carried with him a weird darkness that really dictated his actions and would soon permeate the very foundations of a seemingly innocuous building out in Englewood, which is where he found himself.
Englewood?
Englewood, yeah.
All right.
But not California Englewood,
right.
Illinois Englewood, I guess.
So who ended up taking this guy down? The Flash or what?
Yeah, I think he became the Reverse Flash or something.
Yeah.
What time of 1886 did he get there? Do you know?
Ooh, that's August. I believe it was. I'm 99% sure it was August in 1886.
Interesting. Okay.
Let me double check that. I can very quickly check that.
No, I mean that's fine. That's post Haymarket riot, which the city would have been pretty stressed at this point in time.
Yep, it is August of 1886. Just to confirm.
Okay, all right.
What is that?
The Haymarket riot was in May of, I think, May 1886. It's basically a riot that occurred in the aftermath of a bombing that took place. There were labor demonstrations, as was a thing that happens frequently. And there was a bombing that took place at one of them, and a riot, full-ass riot broke out. Police, protesters fighting.
Just society breaking down. People just going...
1800, think about it, though. The 1800s, off the coast, out the further west you go, the less, organized life was. It was very chaotic out there.
Yeah, dude, over here in 1896 or whatever, it was fucking dudes in cowboy hats walking around on the dusty trail.
Exactly. Out in California, there's, nobody out there. It's all very empty area.
The Haymarket riot was, the symbol of workers' struggle at the time. This is all kind of leading to that point where everyone's workers' rights. And then some countries straight up went communism, and some countries, but it was universally around the world, people were pissed off.
And then America was like, the miracle of American capitalism, personified in a fair that you can visit.
And
Right.
H.H. Holmes very much took advantage of that. Not mentioning that, Jesse, is he had, there was never anybody not willing to work at that time when he showed up. He was hiring people left and right to do these odd jobs, and then a lot of them ended up just disappearing, and nobody really knows what happened to them. We have our guesses and assumptions, but we'll get there. Yeah, Holmes at this point in his life was a tall, some might say distinguished figure. There is a picture, you can go look at him. He's that perfect 1880s mustache taken care of and a bowler hat on top. He was always well dressed. He had a tailored suit, standing out even among the well-heeled travelers, and his features were sharp with piercing eyes that seemed to take in everything around him.
He genuinely looks like if he walked out onto a stage in a vaudeville act that the audience would fucking hiss at him.
Oh, see, the thing is he was extremely charismatic. Women flocked to Holmes. He went through many relationships. We will talk about a couple of them. Yeah, his demeanor radiated an air of self-assurance. He was so confident in everything he did. And to be an egomaniac like he was, he kind of had to be. But those who dared to look closer would detect an unsettling edge beneath that calm facade that he very regularly put forward. To the citizens of Chicago, he would introduce himself as Dr. H.H. Holmes. However, that was just one of his many masks worn by dear old Herman Webster Mudgett. As he set foot onto the platform, few could have imagined the diabolical plans he harbored or the sinister legacy that hangs over our heads still today in pop culture, to the point where even the stuff that we're almost certain is not real is still what is known about H.H. Holmes. He etches himself into the very soul of Chicago.
It's so fucking crazy, dude.
I know.
It's some people thought he was nice, but other people caught him going, nah.
Well, you would actually imagine someone like that, Holmes, with his cackling laugh and his well-dressed kind of attire. His first destination arriving in Chicago would be a grand hotel or an entertainment establishment. He had a lot of money from the amount of scams that he pulled before he got out and moved on his own.
God, it must have been so easy to be a con man back in the day.
Well, especially one that's even remotely competent, like H.H. Holmes.
Absolutely what I
because that's not where he went. He went where I would say the most, a lot of cult targets are, where some of the most vulnerable people live. Instead, his path led him into the quieter neighborhood of Englewood, and there, at the junction of South Wallace Ave and West 63rd Street, stood a very modest drugstore owned and operated by an unsuspecting elderly couple.
Yeah, I'm looking at it right now. You can go straight down to Street View and check it out. At the moment, it is an Aldi.
Yeah.
It's an Aldi, and then across the street is a post office.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense, I guess, now.
The site of the murder castle.
Yeah, so here
it's called
there,
Englewood. It's not Inglewood, in the same way.
E-N-G-L-E Wood.
Oh, it's
Englewood.
Yeah,
Englewood.
And in California,
it's
it's
Inglewood.
Inglewood.
Did I say Ingle? I'm sorry. Englewood. There we go.
Oh, Mathis just his balls.
What happened there?
His balls just dropped.
Oh, hello. What's going on?
And so he strolled in to that small little drugstore owned by that elderly couple. You can imagine a bell on the door jingling as he steps through. And he entered these two lives where he would never exit their lives until they would also leave mysteriously. Amidst the dizzying pace of Chicago's urban sprawl, the Englewood district offered a quieter and almost idyllic respite for Holmes. It was nestled away from the louder clamor of the city's pulsating heart. Englewood had an aura of tranquility and domesticity to it. Its streets were lined with homes that homes that echoed the stories of many, many families living there for a few generations by now, and local businesses that served as cornerstones to the community, much like the drugstore Holmes found himself at. And it was here at this cross section of streets that he walked into this quaint drugstore, its wooden facade painted in shades of blue and white, at least that's what we're told, because the pictures weren't color back then, bore witness to countless neighborhood tales. So this was the drugstore that this small town went to. Everybody knew the owners of this drugstore. That's just kind of how the town it was. Inside, shelves stocked with medicine bottles and glass jars. This is also the time you could walk into this place and probably buy arsenic, no problem.
Time out.
Yeah.
I went to Street View.
Oh, okay.
On the corner of Wallace and 63rd is a mural of a hand shaking another hand that's actually a snake, and it says, "Love all, trust no one."
Yeah.
And that is the funniest thing I could ever imagine being on this corner.
Bueno, 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 bueno.
Well, of course that would be there.
I mean, it makes sense to be there now. So this drugstore was owned by the Draytons. It was like a legacy store. People knew these people. It was a testament to years of hard work and dedication by the two of them. And their world, built on trust and loyalty, especially in the 1890s, was about to be intruded upon by someone who did not give a shit about anything else but themselves. And so that ordinary afternoon, with the sun casting those long shadows on these, at this time, cobbled streets, the drugstore's bell announced the arrival of Holmes, and as he strode in, tall, still impeccably dressed, and having that sophistication wafting off of him. Every movement he made seemed measured, every gesture calculated and refined. He approached the counter with a polite nod, placing a prescription right on top of it. The Draytons, ever welcoming, greeted him warmly. His name, he said, was Dr. HH Holmes, and to the unsuspecting couple, he was just another customer, albeit a bit more polished than most around here. And over the next few weeks, his visits became more and more frequent.
Oh my God, it's like What About Bob, but with the dude who Dorothy turns into
You're
the
going to
Wizard
have
of
to
Oz.
explain the reference to me.
What About Bob is a movie from the 90s where Bill Murray plays an annoying neighbor on vacation and drives the family crazy. I said it's What About Bob, except with the dude that Dorothy turns into the Wizard of Oz, and that'll be Professor Marvel from the beginning of the Wizard of Oz.
Okay.
Who flies on his hot air balloon to the land of Oz and becomes Oz the great and powerful.
It's so almost like that, but the opposite in that, like, the Draytons very much welcomed him. They did not hate him.
Yeah, it's almost like that.
It's almost like that. Yeah.
It wasn't just obviously he wasn't just there for prescriptions. He seemed genuinely interested in the workings of the store itself, often engaging the Draytons in conversations about the latest advancements in medicine or discussing innovative business strategies to try to help elevate their modest store in town. And his affability wasn't just limited to the Draytons. Holmes, with his easy demeanor, quickly became a familiar face to Englewood regulars. He'd chat with young mothers about the best cough syrups for their kids, give advice to elderly gentlemen about alleviating joint pains, and even share a light joke or two, evoking laughter that echoed within the confines of the small store. He was ingratiating himself into a town who very much seemed to love him from the get-go.
It's like he found somebody who was like, I would like to replace them like a body snatcher, and just like learned their whole everything.
To me, I look back and it was like his childhood was him refining his skills to disappear into being who he wants to be. And the town couldn't do that in his town because everybody kind of knew his dark secrets. He wasn't quite refined there. He was getting caught quite a bit. But here, nobody fucking knows who this guy is. And it's like at a very tumultuous time. Obviously, beneath that the veil of friendliness lay a mind that churned with bizarre and evil machinations. Holmes' intent wasn't merely to befriend people. He was, with every interaction, weaving a web, pulling strings tighter around the Draytons and their cherished establishment. And as weeks turned into months, the elderly couple found themselves leaning more and more on the Dr. Holmes. His idea for the store was innovative to these folk, and the profit margins began to noticeably increase. His suggestions were working. But it wasn't just his business acumen that endeared him to the couple. Holmes had a way of making himself indispensable. He'd offer to manage the store on the days they felt unwell, or even suggest that they take a day off while he handled the operations because they've been working so much. It was a slow and almost imperceptible malevolent takeover, weaving his way into these people's lives without them having any idea.
This one, I know what this is like because I witnessed this firsthand. Not going to drop any names, but in our space here on the internet, we know a lot of people, and there was a couple that started dating, and over time, as she became more and more successful, he became more and more like, I'll drive you around. I'll take care of this. I'll do this thing.
I already know who this is.
Yeah, this could be like, to me, it's like two different couples I'm thinking
this
of.
This could be like 14 different couples.
But it's I'll start taking them. And then her license expired, and he's like, don't worry, I'm driving, don't worry. And just more and more, as she became more successful, he permanently clawed. He's like, I'm here forever. You can never get rid of me, because if you get rid of me, your life crumbles. And it was crazy watching that happen. And if you ever were like, maybe we should bring this up, you couldn't, because at that point, it was like, he is the one person in my life who actually takes care of me and does this stuff and is always here. And it's like, yo, you're a baby person now.
You're too much in the woods. Like he took her by the hand and gently walked her into the woods that wasn't so thick, but by the time it's too late,
there's no way out.
They're in the thick of it. You can't get above it. Like you can't get above it.
It was crazy. And seeing that, I totally understand how an elderly couple could fall for someone coming in. It would be even easier.
In the 1890s, in a small town where trust is like still bizarrely like given away for free.
But
very weird.
This is just like south of Chicago. Chicago's huge at this time still. So yeah, it's small, but it's still like the big city's right there, and it's so hard to trust people. But a nice man coming to our small part of the city, this is beautiful. I'm so
what's that?
Like,
what's that movie? What's that movie with the Playboy girl and it's Eric Roberts is like her boyfriend and he kills her, but it's like before that he like buys her a car with her own money and stuff like that. Oh, what the fuck is it called?
I don't know what you're talking about, but weirdly enough, when I said Chicago and you said, what is that movie? Before you even explained the movie, I was about to shout out the Hudsucker Proxy, which is a whole other thing.
That's about hula hoops. That's
about hula hoops. But
that's
I don't know why that came to my mind.
And that's 5 years down the line in Rotten Popcorn. The Hudsucker Proxy.
What is there like even like a?
It's about
Hudsucker Proxy. It's about hula hoops.
It's about hula hoops.
Oh, okay. All right. Well,
and it's about America.
All I need, I guess.
It's about hula hoops and it's about America.
So as days turned to weeks and weeks to months, within the community, whispers started just popping up. Some were in awe of the transformation of the drugstore under the guidance of this mysterious doctor from who knows where. So I got the hiccups out of nowhere. Others, a more skeptical lot, wondered about the sudden absence of the Draytons. Because at some point, the Draytons, according to Holmes, left for California. Overnight, without telling the town, they had just gone. They were done. They retired and they went out to California. And so, but because Holmes wormed his way into town, there's a huge chunk of the town that just believed this guy. They fully believed it. And as the store, once an emblem of warmth and familiarity, now had a looming, almost palpable shadow of intrigue, as at the heart of it was just HH Holmes. His initial interactions were innocent enough. He was a patron, then a friend, and before long, an indispensable part of the business. Holmes possessed that charm, but eventually, the couple, quote unquote, retired, and Holmes found himself in possession of the drugstore. Now, during all of this, he's not staying in a hotel. He's not staying in town. He's staying across the street in a local hostel.
That's just like not a good look. Like it's fine. It's cool. It's just not like a vibe that I want to be putting out when I'm like ingratiating myself into like town as like this like weird debonair gentleman man. It's just a weird vibe in a hostel.
Like, to give you an idea who this elderly couple were too, like, they were both obviously charmed by him, but Mrs. Drayton had like a penchant for herbal remedies. She'd often find herself engrossed in discussions with the citizens about the potential synergy between like traditional herbs and modern medicine, as that was like, we're in the time where modern medicine is making a lot of headway very quickly over the next couple decades. And Mr. Drayton was just a businessman, just simply taken by Holmes' insights into optimizing the store and seeing those results turn into tangible profits. He even like things like just how to stock product was something Holmes like changed how they did. Like the way things were presented on the shelves, what was presented, where it was presented, all changed and all turned into more money. So those weeks, like I said, turned into months. He was a daily visitor, and eventually the elderly couple did kind of leave. Children would curiously peek from behind shelves, hoping to catch a glimpse of the doctor's tricks with medicine bottles, because that's how he ingratiated himself with the children. He would get medicine bottles and juggle them and throw them around and make them disappear. He'd like make the kids laugh. And so not only did the adults have solace in this man's knowledge and presence of like medical stuff, but the kids loved him. He was super fun to them, and he like did all kinds of fun tricks. It's so bizarre. This guy was more than a business consultant, that he was a friend to this couple. Their trust in him grew to the point where they'd leave him in charge of the store when they needed a break, like I said. And the drugstore's ledger, once managed by Mr. Drayton, now bore entries in Holmes' meticulous handwriting. Like, he had taken over their ledger too before they were quote,
he
unquote,
basically
left.
learned. He's like a pod person who like learned their business and ways, and then suddenly
I love that. Yeah, it's exactly
he's like
that.
a cuckoo bird. Yeah, he's like
Other
straight up.
whispers. It's not to say that all townsfolk did trust him. There was a small amount of them that whispered about where this man, how this guy ended up in Englewood. What was the story behind those intense eyes? They like the almost like dead gaze that he gave everybody, despite his charismatic outward appearance. And why, despite his growing influence over the drugstore, did certain aspects of his life consistently remain shrouded in mystery. Just stuff that he would never talk about, never bring up. He literally left as little detail about himself as possible and only told what was absolutely necessary. And that duality was enough to get people talking, but it also had a very elusive aura that drew people in, including many of his female victims down the line. The neighborhood regulars began to actually take note of the change in management. The doctor was always courteous, serving customers with a disarming smile and engaging pleasant talk. But beneath that, obviously, he continued his plot. Where were the elderly owners when they disappeared? The most common narrative was that they had decided to retire and move to the sunny climates of California, entrusting their beloved business to the competent hands of Dr. Holmes. Few questioned this story at all. Primarily because the drugstore continued to flourish under its new management. But the truth was far more chilling. With the elderly couple out of the picture, Holmes wasted no time in solidifying his hold on the property. It was the first piece of what is a dangerous and deathly puzzle that he was crafting, the cornerstones of a nefarious empire that would grow out from Englewood. The drugstore was just the beginning, and as Holmes' roots dug deeper into Chicago's soil, the city remained blissfully unaware of the murderer and serial killer that had descended upon it. As Dr. Holmes tightened his grip on the Englewood drugstore, his ambitions began to stretch far beyond its walls. The unassuming corner of South Wallace Ave and West 63rd Street, which had once hummed with the benign comings and goings of a neighborhood pharmacy, was soon to become the beating heart of Holmes' labyrinthine web of deception. With the Drayton's sudden unexplained departure to California, a narrative Holmes was all too keen to propagate, he became the sole custodian of their life's work. The shop's inventory transformed. New and exotic drugs filled the shelves, reflecting Holmes' expansive knowledge and desire to position the store as the premier destination for medicinal needs in Englewood. Word spread about the revamped establishment and its charismatic new proprietor. Customers, both old and new, were drawn in, captivated by Holmes' charm and the store's unparalleled offerings.
This is just like the best damn chicken place in the city. It's wild to watch the focus become, I'm going to be the best at X, but also kill people.
It's fucked because he just could have just run it.
Done that?
He had his out.
But like, this is the thing, right? The murdering for him, I think for him, he would be what I would consider like almost like a process killer. It's not about the killing. It's about everything that leads up to the moment where he kills them. It's the power, the control, the manipulation, how much he can squeeze out of them for money until they're no longer useful. And then that's when they mysteriously disappear almost always. And this is, like I said, kind of just like the first step in taking over this store after ingratiating himself well into the town. The drugstore's basement, previously that was used for storage, underwent extensive renovations under Holmes. Strange deliveries arrived under the cloak of night. Large quantities of quicklime, a substance known for its ability to rapidly decompose organic matter, and oddly shaped construction equipment all started arriving. Neighborhood children whispered tales of eerie sounds emanating from the depths of the store late at night, an unsettling symphony of muffled screams and metallic clangs. Those, though, are likely a little bit overblown, though the metallic clangs and stuff as things were being built, certainly. As months passed, Holmes' entrepreneurial spirit seemed insatiable. Properties adjacent to the drugstore began being purchased, always through a bizarre, convoluted series of transactions that heavily obscured Holmes' personal involvement. We're talking fake names, fake company, and money that was being used from the scams of life insurance stuff that he had in the past.
Weird.
With a rapidly expanding footprint, he embarked on his most audacious project yet, the construction of a grand, multi-story edifice that the locals began referring to as nothing other than the castle.
The murder castle. Oh, the castle.
No, just the castle.
Just the castle. The normal castle.
To the public, the castle was a marvel of modern architecture and a testament to Englewood's growth and prosperity. Holmes touted it as a hotel, perfectly positioned to cater to visitors of the upcoming World's Columbian Exposition of 1893, but its labyrinthian corridors, soundproofed rooms, and hidden passages told an entirely different story. The building was a maze by design, designed by a mastermind with exits that led to blind alleys and rooms that seemingly vanished into thin air. It's very weird. It almost reminds me of the Winchester home.
Yeah, the Winchester house. Yeah,
but like a way smaller scale.
And hers was to stop ghosts from like figuring out stuff. This
like
was
it's very like actually like a superstition from a different culture that she like built a modern craftsman house. That's a whole other wild thing.
Yeah, that's a whole other thing. This is okay. So he made literally like one of those Tales from the Crypt / Goosebumps murder houses where it's like, don't go in there, kids.
Pretty much.
Cool.
While the intricate passages and darkened chambers of the castle concealed Holmes' most sinister street secrets, another realm of intrigue and deception existed parallel to this man's life. His entanglements with the female sex. Among the many who were lured into the treacherous waters of his life, the tale of Emmeline Sigrind stands out as a poignant testament to Holmes' malevolent magnetism and the amount of manipulation he was willing to pursue. Emmeline, with her raven black hair and doe-eyed innocence, was a woman of ambition and dreams. Hailing from a modest background, she carried aspirations larger than the confines of her current life. As a typist, her days were filled with monotonous tapping of typewriter keys and the humdrum life of an office gig, but she harbored a burning desire, one that would set her on a collision course with the enigmatic Dr. Holmes. She wished to trade her typewriter for a stethoscope and venture into the world of medicine. And nowhere better in Englewood to learn about medicine than Dr. Holmes. In the vast expanse of Chicago, their paths crossed one fateful day. Holmes, ever the charmer, presented himself as a well-established doctor and entrepreneur. His tales of surgeries, medical breakthroughs, and the labyrinthian corridors of the castle, which he portrayed as a beacon of prosperity and modernity, left Emmeline starry-eyed. He spoke eloquently of his adventures, painting vivid pictures of his opulence and success. It wasn't just words. The tangible evidence of his affluence was evidence in his fine clothing, the gold watch that dangled from his waistcoat, the sheaf of banknotes he casually often displayed.
The talking crow that lived on his shoulder. Don't
trust the doctor.
Nothing has changed about the play a game. Dress well, show money for no reason. Like, nothing has changed. You could put this in any time except for gold watch.
This is like, what is his name? Tate? Isn't it Tate? Like the asshole who's like sex crime asshole. Did the same thing. All he did was like flex his money and shit. That's all he ever did.
Yeah, the scam still works to this day. It's wild.
Speaking of all the rich people out there, patreon.com/ChilluminatiPod in case you forgot. Holmes obviously sensed the young woman's aspirations and began to weave for her a dream. He spoke of a world where she, Emmeline Sigrind, could transition from a mere typist to a revered medical professional. He promised to be her mentor, to introduce her to the right people, to finance her education, and to pave her path with golden opportunities. The idea of being under the tutelage of such a distinguished doctor was a temptation that was much too alluring for young Emmeline to resist. But Holmes' interest in Emmeline wasn't purely professional or altruistic, if you haven't learned by now. He was smitten by her beauty and youthful naivety. Their relationship rapidly transformed from that of a mentor-mentee to something much more intimate.
The Phantom of the Opera and a singer.
Exactly. That's exactly what it was. Holmes showered her with gifts, took her to the city's finest establishments, and of course, consistently whispered sweet nothings into her ear. Emmeline, caught in the whirlwind of romance, found herself deeply ensnared in his web. And much like Jesse, you said not too long ago, he's literally doing everything for her. She has he's paying, like everything is being taken care of for her, just as you used an example. She's fucking stuck.
He's basically like integrating himself into her entire like reality.
Mm-hmm. Like, fully. And as the days turned into weeks and weeks into months, that shimmer of the golden dream began tarnishing. Emmeline's interaction with Holmes became sporadic. The promises of medical school and introductions seemed to fade into the ether. On the rare occasions when she was seen, her once vibrant eyes seemed clouded with uncertainty and fear. Whispers began circulating in Englewood about her sudden reclusiveness, her pale demeanor, and her apparent reluctance to speak about Dr. Holmes. And then, just as suddenly as she had entered Holmes' life, Emmeline vanished. Residents of Englewood, especially those who had seen the young couple together, were left with haunting questions. What happened to the vivacious young woman who once dreamt of being a doctor? Had she simply left to pursue her dreams elsewhere, or was her disappearance tied to the eerie and sprawling edifice that was becoming the castle? The chilling truth would remain buried, much like many of Holmes' secrets, in the dark recesses of that malevolent mansion. And that's the thing. A lot of this man's disappearances, the ones we know vanished, we don't have evidence as to what actually happened to them. We never found bodies. We don't really know. Our assumption is when the castle was burned down, so too was whatever evidence was in there. But we'll get to that because we just know she vanished. Maybe her being sick was evidence of her slow poisoning. We don't know. Simultaneously, Holmes' personal life grew more and more complex. Women were drawn to him like moths to a flame, seduced by his sophistication and constant promises of a luxurious life. Emmeline Sigrind, a young and impressionable typist who disappeared, fell for all of those promises. It's his financial machinations were his forte, man. That's just what he was good at doing and how he locked people in. Creditors, suppliers, and investors were constantly cycling through the revolving doors of the castle, each ensnared in Holmes' web of deceit. Many of those companies were left bankrupt. Their life savings vanished into the abyss of Holmes' scams. And while financial ruin was common fate for those entangled with Holmes, others suffered, obviously, a much more chilling end. But yeah, it reminds me a little bit of like the stories we heard of like when Trump hired people to like build his buildings and they would never get paid. It's just Holmes did that to every single person that came through to build, and he would work his scams and companies and always push it off until like they just went bankrupt and no longer could ask for money. Or some people just disappeared. The Englewood's bustling community with its family and tradesmen was completely unaware of what was happening still. The shadows that were being casted by the castle's, and truly when it means castle, like turrets and parapets, like in this building,
sure,
hid secrets that would only come to light years later. His reign over this bizarre, dark castle and his killing empire, I guess, Chicago's underbelly was about to witness the horrors unleashed.
His killing empire is a phrase.
Yeah, thanks. In the Englewood neighborhood of Chicago, where the castle now sat, under the guidance and design of its mastermind, it was an architectural enigma specifically designed to kill fucking people. It was unlike any other building in the vicinity. On the surface, it was a mixed-use edifice comprising of the first floor having retail spaces on the ground floor, including a pharmacy that Holmes acquired under mysterious circumstances,
right,
and apartments on the upper levels. To the casual observer, an unsuspecting tenant, it was merely a modern commercial building. But hidden within its walls were a series of mazes, trapdoors, chutes, secret rooms, and a basement lined and filled with that lie, where all those chutes led to.
Lie like
this building,
like
the LYE, like the lie that was delivered overnight to him, as we said a little bit ago.
Yeah.
It was constructed, right? Do they have the same people that made the Batcave make this? Like
no, Yeah, he cycled through multiple companies and they ended up bankrupt. Most of them ended up bankrupt, and some of the people building it disappeared.
But surely people, when they built it, like they were like, damn, this is a lot of chutes.
No, because they were the way. So I don't really go into detail, but the way he had them build them.
We're building you a jet hangar underneath your mansion?
Yes.
He would hire people for example, he would hire people to go build one very specific room and not able to see or touch anything else. And then another team or another company, they were building the pipes that led to each and every room. That's the only thing they were able to build and touch. And then another person was building the base. And it was all at different times over the course of months. It was so fractured that nobody really had the complete picture as to what the hell was actually being built.
I can never believe people can get away with that, but it's very clearly they did.
And it's also the 1890s. It's still that.
But still in the 1890s, I'd be talking to everybody like, this dude got chutes in his home,
That's
man.
fucking insane.
Let me, I say this for a little bit later, but this is a good time right now to go over just some of the things that were built. So I have a little list of some of the areas and rooms. First, one of the things that were built were gas chambers.
What? In his home?
Some of the rooms, the apartments were designed as airtight chambers where Holmes could release gas to asphyxiate his victims. These rooms had gas lines connected to them, and Holmes could control the release of the gas from his own bedroom.
Stop.
Then there was the
How
secret.
sure are we about this?
Some of this were pretty positive, definitely existed.
So,
the question really becomes, did he use it as often as he claims he did? And
Right.
did they all work all the time?
Right.
But this building definitely existed.
There was a kill mansion for real.
There was a mansion for real. The detail, we know there was chutes. We know there was a basement with
There
lye.
were tenants, though. He had people living
He
in
had people
apartments,
there.
though, right?
Mm-hmm.
Did they still live there, or did he just kill them?
It was kind of a gamble. You didn't really know. If you were a single mom with a little girl, or a kid, you were likely going to be killed, according to Holmes. What else? Let me get to the rest.
Okay,
There was also
okay.
the secret chute. This was hidden in the walls where the chutes that allowed Holmes to quickly dispose of bodies. The chutes led straight to the basement where he had set up an operation that dealt with all that lye to deal with the remains of all the bodies. There was the soundproof vault located near his office. This was a bank vault turned into a torture chamber. Victims were locked inside, and with its soundproof design, their screams went unheard. Due to its airtight nature, victims often suffocated to death in there.
What?
Fucking wild.
Often?
I say more than once is me saying often in terms of how many people he claims to have killed in there.
That is
Labyrinthine
fucking
hallways
nuts.
alone. The second floor was a maze of stairways that led to nowhere, doors that opened to brick walls, and hallways that twisted back on themselves. This design was meant to disorient and trap victims if they were trying to escape, making the escape near impossible. So he literally built the place and was on the off chance they get out of the airtight locked room, it'll be like Alice in Wonderland and they'll never know where they're going.
This dude is wild.
Dude, yeah, this got way more wild than I thought it would.
Well, the basement, also known as a basement of horrors, was arguably the most gruesome part of the castle. It was equipped with surgical tables and instruments, suggesting that Holmes dissected a lot of his victims when the bodies slid down the chute. There were also vats of acid, pits of quicklime for decomposing flesh, and a large kiln or furnace presumably used to cremate bodies. Some reports also suggest that there were scratching racks. He also had hinged walls and secret panels. Certain walls in the castle were hinged, allowing them to be moved or adjusted. This feature, along with various secret panels, enabled Holmes to sneak around and access rooms without being seen. The dude would literally have, in the middle of the night, a wall would move out of place, and there with his fingers, and it's hanging like a vampire is Holmes.
How is that possible, dude?
This is bonkers territory.
How is that possible?
And then the last bit, some of the rooms were padded and soundproof to ensure that no cries for help were heard from the outside. Some rooms were entirely soundproof. A few were padded, like I said, and much like an insane asylum's padded cell, basically, which could serve both to muffle the sound and prevent victims from injuring themselves in a bid to escape. It was a small slapdash of what was being built at that time, what he was operating. Again, how much of it was operational properly, how much he used. We do know he killed a couple people via the gassing them. We know that happened. It's just, did 27 victims happen like he claims?
I was watching the show How To with John Wilson the other day, and on the show, he ended up talking. He was going to extreme lengths to go to the bathroom. Was kind of the vibe of the show that he was doing, and he eventually went to this guy who was slowly trying to move his family into a missile silo, that he was converting into a house.
I've seen stuff like that online.
Yeah, and he had inside the missile silo, none of the walls were built, none of the toilets were running, anything like that. But there was in one room, every single one of those 3/4 size arcade cabinets standing against one back wall that are for sale, and all the some shredding metal axe, guitar, and a half stack amp, and all this crazy stuff. And in my mind, I'm wondering if HH Holmes was kind of more like that. than like this like Batman villain from the 1800s where like he just had this stuff rigged up and he was like, this is sick. Because it just seems so impossible that could happen more than one time and then anybody wouldn't just find out about it. Just from the screaming alone.
I mean, but okay, well, yeah, but if it was soundproofed as well as he claims, nobody would be able to hear it. And you got to keep in mind, too, where he positioned his place. A lot of his victims were people traveling into Chicago or visiting. A lot of his victims weren't people who lived in Englewood. They were people who were coming for the World's Fair, the Columbian Fair. That was like a lot of who his victims were.
That's true. Yeah, that's true.
Sorry, I'm obsessed with trying to figure out if this story is what sparks a lot of the, I don't know, like the weird 70s, 80s movies of like Murder Mansion, you know? I tried to look, but there's a lot more books than there are movies. So there's got to be. I mean, like a lot of it is so out there that it had to have been like a Tales from the Crypt episode. You know what I mean? Like there's got to be something.
Right, exactly. So by the time the building was finally finished and the structure was fully operational, Holmes had set his sights on more than just architectural domination. Clearly, he's set on being one of the most prolific serial killers Chicago had ever seen. And so now, using his charm, deceptive practices, combined with the castle that he could bring people to, his real reign of evil began. One of the first was Julia Smith. And by Smith, I spell it she spells it rather Smythe. Smythe, maybe? Julia Smythe?
Could be.
She was the wife of Ned Connor, who had moved into Holmes' building and began working at his pharmacy's jewelry counter. Yeah, then keep in mind, again, first floor had retail-like spaces. So he had people working like where he like was also living and having them live. With time, Julia started an affair with Holmes. And Ned, when he learned about it, obviously left Julia, moving away and leaving her and their daughter, Pearl, behind. Julia and Pearl were last seen on Christmas Eve of 1891, not long after Connor left. Holmes claimed that she had died during an abortion, but their bodies were never found. And what happened to them, we don't really know other than Holmes clearly killed them.
Wow, so he really did maybe just dump a bunch of people into a giant vat of lye and just disappear them.
Yes.
Huh.
Like it happened. The question is, did it happen as he said? And did it happen as often as he said? I
always just sort of assumed that he maybe did this like one time, but the fact that it's actually happened more than once is fucking crazy to me.
She, then obviously Emmeline, as we said, she, to give you a date when she disappeared in December of 1892. And Holmes' excuse for that was varying. He never really had a certain thing, but she was just never seen again. And in his insidious game of cat and mouse, Holmes also engaged with Minnie Williams in 1893. She was a Texas heiress who Holmes convinced to transfer the deed of her Texas property to a man named Alexander Bond, which was an alias of H.H. Holmes, of course.
Well, that's my name.
What is better, H.H. Holmes or Alexander Bond?
I'm biased, but I'm going with Alexander Bond.
It's pretty good.
Yeah.
It's
for a serial for an evil man.
H.H. Holmes?
H.H. Holmes.
H.H. Holmes sounds like a doctor who's a good man. Alexander Bond will rip you off.
Yeah.
That guy is a scam
He's
artist.
already a walking copyright infringement.
So it's then even more impressive then that Holmes was able to convince her to transfer it to Alexander Bond instead of himself, obviously. And then Minnie and her sister Nanny were both invited to the castle. While the exact details remain murky as ever, like most of his, neither sister was ever seen again after their visit. They literally arrived to visit, and then they were just instantly gone. Nobody fucking really bothered to figure it out. Holmes' malevolent practices didn't stop at murder. He was also a fucking con artist, lest you forget. He was adept at swindling money from unsuspecting victims, and with insurance fraud, became another staple of his repertoire even here in Englewood. As the World's Columbian Exposition, also known as the Chicago World's Fair, drew tens of thousands to the city in 1893, Holmes Castle became an attractive location for lodgings. And many who sought rooms in his buildings were never heard from again. The transient nature of the city's population during the fair made it very easy for Holmes to carry out his dark deeds without immediate suspicion. It's worth noting that while the castle was a place of untold horrors, not all of Holmes' victims met their fate there. His reign of terror spanned various locations and involved a myriad of schemes. However, the castle was the emblematic piece of Holmes' dark genius, a physical manifestation of what he truly wanted to be. It wouldn't be until later that authorities would begin to grasp the full scope of Holmes' atrocities. Piecing together his intricate web of crimes was a daunting task, but as the walls of the castle were breached, finally, the true horror of what transpired within came to light, cementing Holmes' place as one of America's most notorious serial killers. The initial thing that kind of pulled the thread on Holmes' entire operation was a girl named Sarah, who was a young woman from a rural town, was one of the many people who had fallen into Holmes' web of deceit. Lured by the promise of employment in the big city, she had been given a room in the castle. She quickly became disoriented within its twisting hallways, never realizing the walls of her room could be adjusted to make the space smaller. She felt a growing sense of dread, a feeling that something was wrong, and it wasn't long before she discovered a peephole in her door. And she became aware of right behind that peephole was a small gas nozzle hidden behind a vent. Panic surged through her as she tried desperately to find a way out, but every door she opened seemed to lead to another confounding hallway or a sealed brick wall. Her desperate cries for help echoed through the hallways, only to be drowned out by the walls Holmes had carefully insulated to stifle sound. The basement obviously is where the bodies would end up, and the exact number of victims Holmes tortured and killed like this is still a topic for debate. Some say it was as few as 9, which is still a I don't think it was in the hundreds personally, but there are quite a few people out there. And I mean, it's easy to kind of slap a number, a big number as people go missing at this time around, even in just this area. It was easy to slap it on Holmes. And Holmes was would never say no to bringing more infamy onto himself, even after he was arrested. Right. So I don't think it was the hundreds. I think it was probably closer to 9. I think it was closer to a lower number personally. But yeah, there are guesses as high as a couple hundred. Yeah, it wouldn't be revealed until Holmes would be captured and brought to justice just 1 year later in 1894. So his murder castle was like a 3-year stint. It was a few years of being built, open in 1891. He had 2 to 3 years where he murdered like crazy, and then he was caught in 1894. Yeah, this was all his fall was kind of a win for the police at this time. In the swirling underbelly of 19th century America, when its gaslit streets and promises of new beginnings were kind of lay there like a serpent, with Holmes there ready to strike, as the sun set on a multitude of his sinister endeavors, it was one final gambit, one last act of treachery that would mark the end of his killing spree. In 1894, Benjamin Pitezel, a carpenter by trade and a criminal by disposition, was deeply entangled in Holmes' dark web. Pitezel had been an accomplice to Holmes in various fraud schemes over the years. He was kind of his fraud partner. He was a lot of two-man jobs to get some money.
Right, like a Giuliani, if you will. Yeah.
Yes, there you go. They had staged accidents and collected insurance money, always skirting the watchful eye of the law. But Holmes, ever the opportunist, envisioned a grander scheme that involved not just fraud, but murder. The plan was audacious in its simplicity. Pitezel would take out a $10,000 life insurance policy on himself, which today's money is around $300,000. He would then, quote unquote, disappear, and Holmes would, due to his thieving ways, produce a cadaver, which they would claim was Pitezel's body. With the insurance money then secured, they would split the proceeds and move on to their next nefarious scam. But Holmes, as history has shown, was not one to share for very long.
Stop. Insurance fraud is what got this dude.
Yeah. Yes, it's literally what
this is.
Let's get to
bringing down, mobsters for tax evasion.
Yeah,
Capone was the same thing.
Same thing. Yeah.
So goofy.
One day we'll do more mobster stuff. I love the mobster stuff.
But Capone also didn't have a fucking vat of lye at the bottom of his house where all his victims turned to.
That is a flaw in this whole plan. Most serial killers will bury bodies way out in the middle of nowhere. This guy's like, under my house, it's easier that way.
So fucking nuts.
On September 2nd, 1894, in a nondescript house in Philadelphia, Holmes and Pitezel prepared to put their plan into motion. Pitezel, trusting his friend, drank a bizarre potion that was given to him by Holmes, purported by Holmes to just help him relax and chill out. As the drug coursed through its system, and his world grew more and more dim, Holmes, in cold precision, turned on the gas, letting it flood the room. And it wasn't long before Peitzel was dead, the victim of his accomplice's treachery. To make the corpse resemble an accidental death, Holmes did what he did back in his small town where he grew up. He disfigured Peitzel's body using chemicals, making identification more challenging for the police. However, as with many grand schemes, things didn't go exactly as planned this time. Insurance investigators, growing increasingly suspicious of the amount of claims surrounding Holmes over the years, dispatched a detective named Frank Geyer, Geyer, to look into Peitzel's death. Geyer was methodical, relentless, and had an intuition that something was wrong. As he dug deeper, the threads quickly began to unravel. He soon discovered that Peitzel's wife, unaware of her husband's death and under Holmes' manipulative spells still, was searching for her missing spouse. She was looking for him. More alarmingly, 3 of Peitzel's children were also unaccounted for, missing. Holmes had taken them under the pretense of reuniting them with their father, leading them on a grim cross-country journey, only to murder 2 of the girls and hide their bodies in a trunk.
Jesus.
Oh.
With evidence mounting, though, the noose finally began to tighten around Holmes' neck. And in Boston, on November 17th, 1894, the law caught up with H.H. Holmes. He was arrested initially for insurance fraud. But as investigators started piecing together the scope of his crimes, they stumbled upon the horrors of the murder castle in Chicago and the true extent of his malevolence. You gotta keep in mind, he did travel a lot. A lot of his insurance scams happened in other cities. He didn't do it all in one place all the time. It was the Peitzel case, with its blend of fraud and cold-blooded murder, that ultimately brought down America's first documented serial killer. That's the other thing. Holmes is technically our first documented serial killer of the U.S.
That's he was a serial killer. He was something
correct.
different.
That's what I mean by documented. Yeah. He's the first one people kind of acknowledge as what is known as a serial killer back then. Obviously, there were people like Boone Helm before that and others like that were killing people all the time.
Wait, so did the term serial killer come from him?
Oh, God.
Or did it exist and then there's the first American one, is what you're saying?
I think in the 60s.
1974, it became the term. So it was early for its team. I guess it's what they mean is like that, or what I mean rather is just like they note him as like killing as his like main focus. Like it's like all he fucking cared about.
All right. So definition wise, unimportant. You mean
literally
like the first,
the Joker?
Yeah, the first of the first to do this.
Gotcha. Okay,
that's not like in the woods trying to survive or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it was in November 17th of 1894 in Boston where they arrested him and they started figuring out what was going on in the murder castle and the true extent of his malevolence. And it was this case, the Peitzel case, because of the weird mix that pulled it. And Holmes was tried and convicted for Peitzel's murder on May 7th, 1896. So he was arrested and sat in prison for around 2 years before he finally got kind of put away for it forever. This particular testament is interesting because it's while he's in prison after the Peitzel case that the other murders and other missing people's case, he started just kind of claiming to. It's one of like, this is a really good example, an early example.
He'd be like, melted him.
Of a serial killer who clearly was over exaggerating the kills himself and what the house actually was able to be done by. But also like anything that went missing, he just kind of was like, I did it. And built his own kind of infamy on that. The thing is that he's very, very likely lying. There's no evidence that many people were going into Englewood and disappearing into Englewood. And even when he was traveling, not every time he fucking disappeared, people were going away and disappearing, but he would still claim, these things. And I think that leads to why his great-great-grandson or whatever also was like, he was also Jack the Ripper because he was like traveling and maybe was killing, but that's just not true, on how it went down.
Sure.
And before anybody could truly know what the house was like, what it actually was in that home, it was fucking quote unquote mysteriously burned down.
The whole fucking place?
Yeah, the whole castle burned down.
Nobody found the lie pit underground?
No, like I think that was one of the pieces of evidence that was able to be like seen. The Holmes Castle burned in, let me give you an exact date. August 19th, the row of buildings at 63rd and Wallace Streets, Englewood, burned this morning. This row constituted the castle in which H.H. Holmes, the confessed insurance swindler, now awaiting sentence in Philadelphia, is popularly supposed to have concocted many of his crimes committed in numerous murders. August 20th, 1895, that's when the house burned down. So while he was in prison, the house burned down. And again, nobody really knew, because again, he was arrested for insurance fraud, and that's what he was sitting in prison for while they did this exploration to his killings. And before they could even really learn much more about the house fucking went down. And as you can see in the newspaper clipping, he's most known for his fucking insurance swindling and quote unquote supposed murders. They didn't even know for that at that point. But regardless, the killing of that particular individual, plus with all the insurance scams, our dear old Holmes would be put to death, hung in 1897. But his story would live on in infamy forever. And that, boys, is the story of H.H. Holmes.
It's absolutely unbelievable how wild you could get. Like now,
Yep.
there's wild people of a different kind, but this is just like you put on a costume, you're like, I'm not Hubert Mudgett, I'm fucking H.H. Holmes, the murder master. And that's all you had to do.
He took to that at such a young age where he was like, who he was, what he came from, he just didn't matter. That was all a lie. That's not what he cared about. He was somebody else. New name, new ambition.
That isn't, we think that in today's society you can't do that, but
it's harder to, but it's still possible.
Oh my God, it's possible. So the woman who was she had the company. She tried to look like Steve Jobs, and she was like the chick who always has the big eyes, crazy-eyed Theramos, or whatever the hell that thing was called.
Theranos,
where it was like a fake blood test that was all BS, and she conned so many people. Yeah, like she and the dude that worked with her were just conning everyone.
That's true,
and it happens still.
Yep, it definitely happens still. And it's just back then
they told everyone they were very important, like science doctors, and we know our stuff, and they just lied, and then they got other people to lie for them until finally people were like, we probably shouldn't lie anymore. Like, you can do that. It happens.
It's absolutely
I mean,
insane.
Boone Helm straight up lied about who he was related to when people would talk to him. Like, it's wild. And H.H. Holmes, so the thing I want to say at the very end here is that in the past about 4 years, some more discoveries have come to light in that a lot of what his home was supposedly, how often it was used, are being proven to kind of be truly false. Not only is there no evidence, but a lot of the people who were supposedly missing, down the line, you can kind of figure out what happened to them. Not everybody he claims murdered was murdered by them. Other reasons for their disappearances would come forward over the century or two as time would go on. But Holmes, and so like when you're left, what we're really left with is like the group of like about 9, where it's like the 3 women he kind of seduced, plus the kids he killed, along with the older couple. You're looking at, I would say, probably 9 he killed. And he probably used his home. He likely gassed them. How much of that home worked like a moving maze, like they claim, there's no way to fucking know. But I'm certain he had a couple of kill rooms that he used to gas people. And he had little like peepholes where he could watch them die too. So like
the spirit of it is there regardless of how real it is.
Yeah, the man did kill people. He was evil, and he did attempt to build himself a crazy murder castle.
He at least believed he had a murder castle and was using it.
Yeah.
That's fucking nuts.
And that is our story of H.H. Holmes, everybody. Next week we got a couple special episodes coming for you. We'll announce we'll keep the guests.
They're surprises. Yeah, they're good. They're good surprises. Come see us. I hope you come see us.
I'm surprised.
Yeah, I hope you come see us at. I hope you come see us at Indie PopCon.
Yeah, that'd be great. And when they're listening to this, they're at Indie PopCon, so hopefully they're listening to this episode as they're walking into our panel.
Shout out
Elspeth. Or show rather.
Shout out
except
Elspeth
for Jesse. Jesse won't
coming.
be there. Shout out Elspeth for being like the guest. Jesse will be out in Chicago doing Cox and Crendor live.
From now on, Jesse,
I don't need anybody.
From now on, Jesse, whenever you are gone from anything, we're just going to bring Elspeth in. I think it's been working pretty good these last couple times.
I'm going to be in Chicago opening a castle where I will fill it with lie.
Is Elspeth like the female clone of Jesse? Or is Jesse the male clone of Elspeth?
I'm the male clone of Elspeth. Let's not pretend.
He's JJ Cox. He's not Jesse. He's
I'm JJ Holmes.
Yeah, he's Professor Jessimus J. Combs.
Jessimus J. Combs.
Come to my convenience mart.
Crendor is also here.
All right, we're off to do a mini-sode for patreon.com/ChilluminatiPod. We'll see you next week. Thank you guys so much for your
Wonderful
support.
website.
Buy our merch. We may have a collectible coin coming very soon on the Yeti store.
A coin?
A coin.
I'm gonna
A
buy
true cryptid currency.
I'm going to buy a cheeseburger with it. In the Twilight Zone!
Goodbye!
Bye.
Anyway, me and my wife were sitting outside indulging on our porch one night, enjoying ourselves. I needed to go to the bathroom, so I stepped back inside, and after a few moments, I hear my wife go, "Holy shit, get out here." So I quickly dash back outside, and she's looking up at the sky in awe. I look up too, and there's a perfect line of dozen lights traveling across the sky.